Okay, welcome all of you to our Master in Translational Medicine program presentation today, which is specifically focused on career pathways. We developed this presentation because being an interdisciplinary program, a lot of people don't know all the myriad of possible career pathways that you can take after coming through our program. And a lot of it, of course, does depend on where you've come from as well before you come to the MTM. So let's get into that. First of all, I'd like to start with an introduction. If you have not seen or heard of it before, I am Verna Rodriguez, and I'm the Executive Director of the MTM program across both UC Berkeley and UCSF. I come with over 40 years of experience in the specifically the medical device industry in varying increasing roles of engineering responsibility and executive leadership. Some of the companies I worked for and have lots of connections with are Boston Scientific, as well as what's now Abbott Vascular, Edwards Life Science, and numerous startups that are all around the Bay Area and actually beyond around the world. So I've done some advising with California Life Science Institute, and they do advising for companies up in Canada and also the Nordic regions and around the world, as an example. So I'm excited about this program and to show you about the career pathways. But let's turn it over briefly to Joy so that she can introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I know people have a lot of different things going on today. So thanks for tuning in. So I am the program manager for the MTM program. So I do a lot of the administrative stuff and as well as everything that's related to student affairs. So if you join this program, you will see pretty much Vern and I from the time you apply until you graduate and then beyond.
Okay. So our agenda then is to cover data and trends on MTM career pathways from our students, and so you can see where they have gone over the last several years. We will have MTM alumni that are with us today share their stories, and then you can have a Q&A with them in some breakout rooms. And then we'll talk about professional development opportunities and resources. So our students come from a lot of different backgrounds. And what this shows you is that our, since the inception of our program in 2010, it's grown in terms of numbers, but also in terms of the diversity. So in terms of the bachelor's and areas they come from. So we started out with engineering students, as you can see in the yellow and gold there, most of them being bioengineering, biomedical engineers. But we also recruit plenty of mechanical engineers, EECS, and other engineering roles, chemical engineering, for example. As over the years, we've added the life sciences. You can see mostly biology and biochem, but we also have plenty of MCell bio, other life sciences, psychology, neuroscience, and then we've also increasingly added clinician roles. So our students come not only straight from undergrad, but also we really value the students who come to us with work experience, and those MDs, RNs, clinicians, etc., all bring a great amount of knowledge and diversity in terms of how they attack problems into the MTM program. So folks coming in with engineering undergraduate degrees are much likely to eventually take roles into R&D, and those with clinical background, for instance, are more likely to continue practicing. But all of our students tend to want to be able to focus in some way to take translational medicine from that concept into clinical trials and eventually into fully commercialized products, whether they partner with industry or go directly into industry or some supporting roles such as consulting. That's what they all kind of have in common. So what do alumni do after graduating? Well, we surveyed our alumni, and here are the results. So orienting to the graph, I just wanted to show you the different categories here and sort of stop on this a little bit so you can see. So the darkest, basically either a dark navy or a black bar, is at the far left, and that is for working in industry. And then the blue is working in academia. Clinical practice is the next one, this kind of turquoise role. Bright green is startup entrepreneurs. And then additional education. Some of our students, good percentage, maybe I think 20%, 10 to 20% going to on for a PhD or an MD role. And then lastly, just other. So answer to the first question is career goals at the start of the program as they were coming into it. You can see that a lot of them plan to go into industry, and the first position you can see is the next set of bars. You can see that a lot of people end up going into industry more than they sort of expect to when they're first coming into the program. And a lot of that has to do, as you can see, with basically the job opportunities that are available. And what makes that kind of bump up like that is that the startup entrepreneurs that want to go into that don't necessarily do that right after graduating. So in terms of it's not as common for that to be their very first position, but you can see that in terms of current position, eventually there are a good percentage of folks that do go into startup and entrepreneurship roles. And you can see plenty of people do go on for additional education and basically those clinical work and academia are kind of stay very similar, but you can see most folks go into working in industry. So basically more folks want to be entrepreneurs than actually end up doing it. It is a really hard place to go in terms of starting your own company, but there are more and more resources here at Berkeley and in the Bay Area to connect with. And our program is only one aspect of doing that. You'll see that there's lots and lots of opportunities to connect and grow in that manner if you want to. So there are lots of different career paths, very many, as you can see, in biotech, even though our curriculum started out as medtech, and we expect that with our next career survey that we'll probably have even more neck and neck biotech and medtech as we have just started our therapeutics track. So digital health continues to be, of course, of great interest. I expect that to grow as well. And then you can see the roles of academic research, medical school that are here, and then people going on to various other roles, you know, 1 or 2 alumni each. So let's go on to see what some of the paths are within the sectors. So drilling down into industry, which was one of the largest, of course, places that students go, I basically diced this up into industry as being pharma, med tech, specifically diagnostics and digital. And if we kind of just break apart one of these, a lot of these roles would be similar within pharma or diagnostics or digital, but let's just go into med tech devices to show you what those categories could be. So as an individual contributor, this can be an extremely rewarding role because a lot of people want to be, say, deep technical knowledge in terms of a designer. And so you might not want to go down a management path, but there are plenty of career paths in a technical track in industry. A lot of these can go all the way up to the role of being an advisor to the CEO. So one great area of career path. Leadership and management pretty much speaks for itself. In terms of context support, there are a lot of supporting roles within any of these sectors, specifically within medtech. a lot of these support roles can be things like regulatory affairs, quality, engineering, quality support, also clinical and manufacturing, things like that. In terms of technical roles, lots of other technical roles that might be data management, clinician innovators are another role that a lot of folks with the clinical background go into. And then just entrepreneurs, could be an entrepreneur in residence, or could be obviously an entrepreneur starting their own company. And then there are lots of paths within sectors. So for instance, context support, like I mentioned, these are some of those roles, the regulatory and the quality and clinical that I mentioned, but also things like business development, risk management, preclinical and marketing, and portfolio in terms of product, your product portfolio for company planning. I guess I didn't mention, but I should say that basically all of our MTM students, as they come out, are very well suited to all these roles that I've shown you. But let me show you a breakdown of how alumni job titles fit into some of these categories. So the sum of all these percentages is not equal to 100%. So I just want to give you that caveat because some categories are doubled. For instance, like a senior engineer is doubled up. Okay, so we've got founder, obviously CEO type of job titles, managers, seniors and leads, engineers. Obviously, that's where we have like a senior engineer might be in a management level, as well as being in a technical role. Software and data science, other technical roles, medical students, residents, MDs, clinical research coordinators, and then the folks that go into academics. So you can see that really it's a really broad array of types of titles with more heavy in these management and technical roles. I'm going to transition now to Joy, and she will tell you about some common industry pathways and job titles. Oh, you're on mute, Joy.
Yes, thank you, Verna. So let's break it up another way. So we're basically trying to show you that, everyone that comes in the program has different backgrounds. So everyone's, depending on their background and their goals, go in different directions. So we're just going to break it down in a couple different ways to make it make sense to you. And then we're going to hear from our alumni. So just some common job titles within the product management space. So this is where the intersection of business, technology, and user experiences. So you can strategically drive the vision, development, and market launch and improvement of the company's products. So these are just some of those job titles. The next part is technical. So if you look at the technical, there's different types of technical roles. You do the building, the designing, the testing. So some of these job titles are not as common, like a clinical engineer, for example, but other ones are going to be very common to you, like R&D or software engineer. We look at the next, which is clinical research. So this area is the branch of healthcare science that will determine the safety and effectiveness of medications, devices, diagnostic products, and the treatment regimens. And then the next part on this last slide is consulting. So MTM students are actually really well suited for these types of roles. So we're supporting clients in the development, marketing, positioning, and the regulatory strategy space of their products. So let's continue on. So medical affairs. So this is basically you help, you are that bridge between the companies and the medical professionals, so you can communicate scientific and clinical findings. So it's a great role for clinicians. And then in entrepreneurship, I think, is kind of self-explanatory. You're a founder or C-suite of a company. And then you get into the regulatory space, which you're assisting in obtaining and maintaining government approval for the drugs, devices, and products. Obviously, very key. And then and marketing and sales. So I think that one is also pretty self-explanatory. So we're going to slice it up a different way. So let's take it as if you came into the program as an engineering undergrad. These are examples of the first types of jobs that you could go on to after graduating from the program. So you could be a clinical engineer, a systems engineer, a product manager. So you can see the different types of roles if you have an engineering background coming in the program. So this is about probably like 60% of our students. Life science undergrad, that's about 30% of our students come from a life science background. So these are some of those roles that they'll go on to take after the program. So a research associate, product manager, a consultant, a data scientist, and then the last part of this part is where clinicians go. So about 10% of our population afterwards tend to go into medical affairs or starting their own companies. And we even have an engagement manager at Health Advances. So that's just as examples of first jobs after MTM. So the next bit will be talking about what are the types of companies that are employing our MTM alumni. So this is just to highlight the broad range. So we have very large companies like Roche and Stryker, and to startups like Hinge Health. We also have people go on to small boutique firms and other larger firms, including McKinsey, universities, governmental agencies, private industries, etc. And we just wanted to share a little data about our job placement rates. So within 6 months of graduating, about 80% of our students will have found offers and will be employed. And we do have a subset every year, around 12% that go on to continue their education, whether that be a PhD or going on to med school. But probably one of the reasons you wanted to join us today is to hear from our alumni, right? So we're going to transfer this back to Verna, but we're going to spend the next bit of time just hearing from our alumni and having them introduce themselves, telling their stories, and then have time for Q&A with them.
Great. Thank you, Joy. So I hope that piqued your interest about different career pathways. Obviously, you saw lots of examples. And there's even, I guess I just want to comment, there's also a lot of overlap. So if you saw like a regulatory affairs position, you thought, oh, that was like an engineering function. A lot of life sciences also go into regulatory affairs. A lot of bioengineers, for instance, go into clinical types and field clinical type roles, not just medical. So there's lots of overlap as well, but those were just some samplings of job titles of actual ones that folks have landed in. And so let's take a chance to hear from a couple of our wonderful alumni, and actually not more than a couple, more like a few. So let's have them introduce themselves and spend a few minutes just telling their stories. So I'm going to turn off the screen and instruments of sharing, and we'll have each of them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Jack, and then we'll go in order to Maxine, Jessica, and Jessica.
Jessica, our MD. Oh, you are here, Jessica. Sorry, I didn't see you 10 seconds ago. Yay, everyone's here.
Sorry, I was here 10 seconds ago.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, Jack, tell us a little bit about yourself. And
Yeah, sure. So for those that haven't met me, I'm Jack, and I'm currently working as Venture Insights Manager with McKesson Ventures. So McKesson Ventures is just brief intro. McKesson Ventures is a corporate venture team within McKesson. And as most of you probably know, McKesson does a lot of distribution business for pharmaceutical clients. We also do med surg and other stuff. McKesson is pretty interested in higher margin, higher growth businesses. So they're also thinking about like SaaS businesses and particularly pharmaceutical services. So, for example, I didn't know this before I joined McKesson, but it turns out that they also have a EPA business, a prior auth business, Karma Meds. So that's a little bit of an introduction around McKesson. So my current role within the venture team is I mostly work on the corporate facing side. So I help the team to build internal thought leadership pieces, so writing reports, presentation for senior leadership within McKesson. So that's a lot of it is looking at the startup ecosystem primarily within health tech to figure out like the trends and what's coming through the pipeline, and particularly things that could have an impact to either to our customers or to McKesson's core business in terms of potential disruptions to just like broadly in the healthcare sector. So I do a lot of research, do a lot of writing, doing reports. My role prior to venture was in consulting. So I think out of MTM, I worked with Clearview, and after that was with Red Nucleus, so both consulting roles, working with pharmaceutical companies, helping with corporate strategy, product launch strategy, drug pricing. So a huge part of my background is also in that area as well.
great. Thank you, Jack. All right, Maxine.
Hello. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. I'm Max. I graduated MTM actually earlier this year. And I actually, for some context, I did the program right after undergrad. So I'm literally at my first job right now, which is very exciting. I'm a corporate healthcare associate at GuidePoint. This is a little different than I think what people know. And so it's a thing that basically we'll have clients that will want to speak to people with specific expertise. And what we do is we connect those clients to like industry KOLs, such as like doctors or people who work in hospitals or biotech companies, because they will have, interesting knowledge and stuff that I guess like are helpful to our clients and whatever they need. And I did this because I realized I really didn't like research. I think it just wasn't for me. I realized in undergrad, and like that's how part of the reason why I joined MTM too. It just wasn't working out for me. And so I wanted to do something, I guess, more like corporate businessy strategy stuff, especially since during undergrad and also at MTM, I got exposed to a lot of entrepreneurship stuff and a lot of stuff in Haas Business School, which was like really, I guess, informing my decision to be more in that like consulting space. I think goals, hopefully within the next few years, I will be in healthcare consulting. I believe there was like a really big rough patch for consulting this past year, like this past recruiting cycle. So I wasn't as lucky, but I'm really like grateful to have a job right now. And yeah, like I'm hopefully I will pivot into more of that like BD strategy, life science consulting stuff, because that is kind of like where I realized I wanted to go.
Well, thanks, Max. Thanks for your story of your journey. And let's go to Jessica Zane.
Sounds good. So hi everyone, I'm Jessica. I graduated from MTM 2021. So it's been 3 years and a half now. Currently, I'm a product manager at TikTok's monetization, trust and safety team. In my role, I focus on building scalable features and tools that enhance content safety across TikTok. For example, one of the projects I was working on last year, this past summer, was helping UGC product, which is like UGC in-house produced videos to pass monetization structures that was built for 2C customers. And that was one of like very interesting project. We can dive into that if you guys are interested. And previously, before TikTok, I was a life science consultant at Coral Group, which is a boutique life science consulting firm for 3 years. My experience there includes market research, very similar to Jack's, patient journey mapping, pricing, data pipeline, data analytics, and basically drive product strategies for pharmaceutical clients. And during MTM, my capstone project was optimizing go-to-market strategy for a heart monitoring device for a pharmaceutical company. And then before MTM, I did my undergrad at UCLA, majoring in biology. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. And Jessica, the next Jessica. Jess.
Hey everyone, you can call me Jess. I graduated MTM in 2021 along with Jessica, so lovely to see you again. We both had a COVID experience, so I'm very glad you get to be there in person. I hope you maximize it as much as possible. My background, I graduated from UC Berkeley in 2020, go Bears. I studied public health, and then I was kind of lost. I knew I wanted to apply to med school. I wasn't sure that I was prepared. I wasn't sure. I was kind of jaded, with the whole healthcare experience and healthcare in America, and the MTM just seemed like a great fit for me. I like the idea that it trains you in solving problems, not just kind of approaching the system as it is. So that was like an excellent next step for me right out of undergrad. I think we made the most of our online year. I think it was like the best way I could have spent it. After I graduated from the MTM, I worked as a clinical research coordinator at a lab with UCSF. So this was a study or my experience in MTM. Let me start with that. I worked with a doctor, an interventional radiologist over at Stanford, who was working on an adjustable size catheter for pediatric kidney dialysis. So very related to what I want to do. I think it gave me the vision of, I can go into medicine and I can be a physician and I can see a problem and fix it. And that's kind of my career goal now. So I really appreciated working on that project. After I graduated, I did my clinical research work with this dementia screening tool. So I kind of work with patients, asking them about their memory and how we could try to catch Alzheimer's disease at maybe an earlier stage. So that was really meaningful, impactful work. And I think I used both that experience on the clinical research as well as the MTM to kind of show myself off as someone unique for medical school. And now I'm at UCSF. I'm in my 3rd year. I'm actually rotating right now at Kaiser San Leandro. So I just finished up with my patients for the day. I'm finishing my last notes and excited to chat with you all. If you're interested in kind of if you're thinking about medical school and, becoming a physician or whether or not that might be the right path for you, feel free to reach out. I can share my email with you later.
Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, so with that, I'd like to kick off Q&A, maybe with just a few pre-prepared questions, and then we'll open it up to students and go from there. So how about, first question is, and any of you can kind of raise your hand for this on our panel there. What was the most formative or impactful aspect of the MTM? Like, what were the key skills or experiences that you felt you got from the program that prepared you for your role after graduation?
I can take this one as like
Yeah.
the most recent graduate. I think the capstone was definitely the biggest one. I think the huge takeaway that I think carried me through my interview process was definitely that I was able to meet with the FDA, which is crazy, like once in a lifetime experience for anyone. So I think that was, and also just like the things and the mentorship that my capstone offered me was really helpful. And overall, like that has been great. But also not just that, I think the opportunity to take classes outside of just like engineering, we're able to take classes in Haas Business School, if you don't know that. Which has been really helpful because essentially I got to sit in on all of these like really interesting classes that are also healthcare focused. And yeah, I think having that opportunity and getting to network around there is very, very good.
Great. Thanks, Max. I've got a question also. I think I'll have this one for Jack. So Jack, could you tell us what is it like working in your space, with venture capital? And how did you become interested in that pathway? Did you kind of already know that as you came into the MTM? How did that come about for you? And also, I'm not sure if you mentioned what your undergrad was. If you didn't, then I forgot what it was. So maybe you could tell us that too.
Yeah. I certainly did not cover that, which I should. So my background is in biomaterial engineering, so material science. That's my background in undergrad. I went to University of Illinois in Champaign before coming to MTM. So I didn't have a professional working experience prior to joining MTM. So I actually did. So when I joined MTM, my goal was very much set on doing consulting at the time, and I was very, very set on telling everyone about that, which I do slightly regret now. And but I was very interested in doing consulting. I was very curious about the commercial side of healthcare business, which is still very much the same. And I didn't learn much about venture capital or just investing as a career pathway until so I think it was, I don't remember the specific name of that elective, but it was a Haas course that specifically talked about healthcare venture. That course was very, very eye-opening. It was really cool. And if you have an opportunity to take that, do take that. They would invite a bunch of founders, and so I think the class were hosted by two guest speakers or lecturers, both from like VC backgrounds. So that was really cool. By the time, I wasn't really planning on going into VC just yet. So it was until like around 2 or 3 years later when I bumped into this opportunity to jump over to venture capital world. I'm not sure if that is truly helpful, because partially I was pretty lucky to run into that opportunity. They were hiring and trying to be a pretty cool, pretty good experience so far.
Great. Okay, let me try another question. For any of the students who've been in the workforce, like in the last 4 or 5 years, so how did your, plan, your 5-year plan, if you had one, for entering the program, how does it compare to where you are now? Anyone?
I feel like my answer is like gonna be more unique because I just kind of went from grad school to grad school, but
Oh, nice.
I had a pretty tough time with med school applications. I think I didn't have a lot of like mentorship, and that's something I try to do now because it's something I struggled with. But when I was at a point where I was like, oh, I don't know if I'll get into med school this cycle, what can I do next? I will say like I do think the MTM gave me skills to be successful had I chosen another path, like had I not gone the grad school path. Because of MTM, I was exposed more to clinical research. I really leaned into that as kind of my alternate career I would have been very happy in. And I don't think I would have considered that as much before starting the MTM. So with my capstone project, I got a lot of skills with setting up a clinical trial, like figuring out how to apply for grants and figuring out how to apply for IRB approval. And I think these are a lot of translatable skills that are good to pick up and maybe like keep listing like on your resume, because you never know, like maybe you have a plan for grad school or a specific career pathway. And if it doesn't work out, having these specific skills can help you pivot. And it even helps me now when I'm applying for other research opportunities, just like in the kind of grad school space, saying that I have IRB experience from this project opens a couple more doors for me than it might for other people. So I would say, like, in terms of my 5-year plan, like I'm very lucky things worked out, but had they not worked out, I think MTM gave me like a vision of maybe I can go into clinical research, maybe I can go into IRB. Like there are other ways I can pivot the skills that I've gained from this into a different career.
Great. Thank you, Jess. I think so. I think with that, that's like one big theme, I think, of students coming out of our program is that a lot of students get the ability or just the insight that, oh, I want to pivot. Either they come in thinking that they want to pivot, and that's already kind of intentional. But a lot of students come in and they either pivot to something different than they originally thought, or they come in and basically, you know, make a pivot based on what they were planning on in the first place. But I think maybe the last question, because Jessica, I know students might be wondering, TikTok, why and how did she pivot into that? And then what skills were transferable? So, because obviously that's a big move in a lot of ways. So Jessica, share a little bit of that, because I think students might be like wondering, like, why, when, so.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Verna. So I'll start with my undergrad experience. So when I was at UCLA, I just didn't know better and I don't know what I can do after graduation, but I just chose biology out of my passion. I just love hearing all the vocabularies in biology, just like sounds like singing to me, you know. I just had so much fun studying biology. But close to my senior year, I was like, what can I do after graduation as an international student? Because not only I have to consider what I can do, what company I can go to, and I have to also consider, what company that sponsor international student. It turns out most of like 99% of the company that I ran into, they don't take international students out of undergrad. So luckily, I was at bioengineering lab at UCLA, who was previous the professor of MTM program, and he recommended this program to me. And when I first heard this programs, I'm like, doing translating language from one language to another one. And then he was like, no, this is, translating research into, bringing from the bench to the bedside. And then he told me the whole concept of what MTM is and what you can learn from this program. And that was the only program that I applied to after graduation from, my undergrad degree. And I was like, okay, either this program or nothing. I'll go back to China if I don't get in, because there was no other program that I was interested in, because most of the bio-related programs are lab focused or, a lot of research focused. That was not something that I liked. So after joining MTM, I think the most thing I learned from this program is what I can do. What is the industry like? What are the opportunities that's available for us? And exposing us to all kinds of different skill set and opportunities that offered in this program. And I think one of my favorite class I took here was product development, which was my first initial exposure to product management. But unfortunately, I was not lucky enough to get into product management for my first job. So I went into consulting first, because I heard consulting, you can learn all kinds of different skill sets, just like MTM program, and where I learned a lot of patient journey mapping, market research, data analytics, pricing, and how do you do stakeholder management, how do you talk to different stakeholders within a biotech or pharmaceutical company. I think most of the skill set I learned was very transferable because, you know, as a product manager, you have to be the intersect of business, you know, user experience and, you know, engineering. And that's very similar to what you will be doing in consulting. And yeah, that's why. So when I joined consulting, I specifically asked for a product management related project, even though I didn't get put on 100% of the product management project, but I feel like all the project that I got be able to work on was very, you know, very useful and got me exposed to a lot of different skill set that I will be that you will be need to, you know, get into product management skill, you know, this industry. Mhm.
Good. And yeah, product management is obviously very broad and not even just related to med tech and biotech. So let's open it up for a Q&A. And then Joy, are we going to just do general Q&A or do we go into breakout rooms on this one? I forget.
Just general.
Yeah, good. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Hey,
So it
Allie.
looks like Allie, yes, please.
Hi, Joy, Verna. Thank you guys so much for putting this together, and thank you guys, the alumni as well, for joining. So yeah, I'm Ali. I'm currently an undergrad at Berkeley, and I got interested in this program just because of the cross-disciplinary aspect of it. I work a lot with those biotech leaders, businesses, and whatnot, which is why. Also, Jack, yeah, thank you for sharing that about your experience. It's really interesting, the switch. So I'm curious, really, for everyone, if anyone wants to share a story, because I noticed that a lot of times it's within classes that you get these moments of inspiration, or just something that's mentioned that essentially changes the trajectory of your life. So I'm curious about any of some of those classes that happen at MTM. You guys mentioned some of the Haas classes, but I'm curious about the others, maybe clinical research or the capstone project. Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Hey, fellow Berkeley undergrad. So I think like you should look into things that are outside of your major, because like I think I can speak to this as like I did bioengineering my undergrad. I decided not to do, and very intentionally not to do, engineering for any of my classes. That being said, I focused a lot on public health. I think like HPM, which is like health policy and management, it's a wonderful department. And they have really wonderful classes on like health equity and how the, I guess, medical and hospital side and insurance. I think that was a really great class. It put a lot of things into perspective for me. That being said, I also want to really shout out a huge class from Haas, which was MBA 295T. This is lean transfer. If you get into the program, people will not stop talking about lean transfer. It is a class where you basically do customer discovery for the entire semester. And it was such a good class. It was like you get to do like cold calling, you get to influence decisions based on like customer discovery and work with like an actual company. And so there is a lot of work to do for that class, but I loved it so much. It was just like such an amazing experience. And there's a competition if, you know, if you really are interested, there was like a little competition that the class did. And yeah, I don't know. It was like, I think those two classes or those two like camps were really interesting to me. And I enjoyed like what I learned from them, because I think over time, like they kind of shaped my like overview of like, oh, I want to get into, you know, something to do with like access or like health equity, something like that.
Thanks, Maxine. I think that's really common. I think the general theme that I find is that obviously we have mostly folks that come with pretty technical background, whether it's engineering or the life sciences. And so students often take advantage of the MBA courses and the health policy and public policy classes. Those are like really popular. And also just because one thing that's a lot of people ask is, well, how do I balance my units? Like, don't I have to take all these science classes? And just so you know that our program is set up so that a couple of our core classes that have a pretty good number of units assigned to them, you can flex your units on what category they go to. So because of your ability to flex, you can then say, all right, I'm covering all my engineering because I'm taking this class from Dr. Roy or Verna, and I'm piling all my science classes over here so that I can have my extra elective courses focused on this other area of business, for instance. So that's one thing that I think I want to clarify, because a lot of people don't really understand exactly how am I going to, especially even actually folks who might be considering this that are more on the business side, or maybe not a super deep technical, but are kind of worried. I said, listen, there's an ability to flex your units to a pretty good amount of degree, so you can really craft this as the degree to what you want to pivot it to. So Maya, next question.
Yeah, hi. This is relatively directed at something that Jess was talking about. You were talking about the clinical experience that you were getting. I was just wanted to ask, after getting through the program, being on the other end, what are ways that you would recommend, either through the capstone project, through courses, or just through additional opportunities that are at your fingertips? Like, how would you get the most kind of experience in the clinical realm? I work in med devices, and I'm looking to transfer from the R&D to the clinical side. So yeah.
Awesome. Great question. So how to get the most out of the program if you want to lean more clinical afterwards, if I'm understanding your question. I think something Jessica mentioned earlier, I thought was very cute, was about the translation, like, oh, we're translating from bench to bedside, not words. I think one of the best skills I got out of this program was translating words. Like, I felt like before this program, if someone asked me what my degree was, I'd be like, oh, public health. I don't know. I kind of like talk about health policy or whatever. But after this program, you learn really well how to state like the skill that you have as like a marketable skill on your resume. For example, just like we do a lot of practice with pitching your project. So should you decide to go forward with this degree, people are going to ask you, what is MTM? I've never heard about that before. So you get very good at this pitch of like, this is MTM, this is what it is. It's like combining the clinical, business, and like technical side of devices and drugs from the bench to the bedside. Like you have like a pitch like that you can say. So I think one thing that you get out of it is just, by nature of the program, you get trained a lot in like, no, you're not just taking a class. Like what Max was saying earlier, like you're doing lean transfer, you're conducting cold calls, like you get to name these very specific skills that you can talk about in future interviews and on your resume really well. So that's one thing. How to get the most out of your capstone. I mean, that's kind of up to like which capstone that you end up with. So our process of choosing capstone is we had these different capstone project leaders like pitch to us. So they might have been, folks with their own company, kind of an industry. In my experience, the doctor that I worked with on the capstone had his own company, but he was also a clinical provider. So then I thought, okay, like this is both a good mentor in terms of he's, who I want to be when I grow up, but also like he's currently a practicing physician. Like he ended up writing me a letter of recommendation for medical school, like all of these things are helpful. So I think when you get pitched your capstone project, ask good questions about like, I'm interested in going more to the clinical side. What are ways that I can like develop those skills? And so there were other projects that were also pitched by physicians where they said, honestly, like we don't have that much space for a clinical team member right now. We're looking for people who want to develop like their business building skills, So then I might say no to that project. And then the project that I ended up choosing, I said yes to because he told me, developing an IRB application, like learning more about how to translate our project to other physicians, conducting like market research with physicians, nurses, patients, like all of this you can talk about in your future med school interviews or wherever you go next. So I think asking your capstone project, like potential project people, like what exactly am I going to do and how will that help me in the future career I want to go to would be helpful. And then in courses, I mean, I think one of the things I'm hearing echoed a lot with a lot of the alumni is like the networking is a big like plus. You're working, you get classes at UC Berkeley and UCSF. You have some of like the best, minds that are working here and some really big names in big fields. I think just like be open-minded, try to take courses that might not be overlapping with whatever you do in undergrad. And like I tried to pick courses where I had a professor who used to who's also a physician, so like he could speak to some of that experience in some of our coursework as well. So I think getting to know him, getting a recommendation letter from him, like that kind of networking was all very helpful. I hope that answered your question.
Great. Yeah, and I think that is key, especially about when you're assigned to your capstone, you get to vote on the capstone that you work on. And so specifically, I know this year students then really paid attention to at what stage their capstone project was in, because some students said, oh, because if you're lucky, and you really want to do, say, a clinical, have clinical study experience, then hopefully you have one that's within a clinical study. I mean, it's kind of random of what we get, but usually they're across a gamut. Some may be starting in animal studies, some may be starting into clinical studies or well along. So you can hopefully find a project that is really close to the area that you want to focus on, and then be the team member as you're voting. Say we have the students also state what kind of role they want to do. So then I match you with students who want different roles, right? So that you can basically focus on those areas that you want. Let's go to Christian, and then I think, Joy, do we need to probably go to our other slides after that?
Yeah, we'll finish up the slides and then we'll do more questions. But yeah, go for it, Christian.
Hey guys, how's it going? So I'm Christian, and I'm actually currently a practicing ear, nose, and throat PA here in New York City. And I visited San Francisco a year ago, and I met some students in the program, and they said that they told me about it, and I got really interested in it. I've been meaning to apply for a long time, but I wanted to ask the students, which colleagues did you ask to write your recommendation letters when you were applying for the program?
People trying to remember.
Yeah, I was
who
right
wrote
out
it?
of undergrad, so I know we'll have different experiences, but I asked them I worked on some clinical research projects, so they kind of spoke to like my interest in like research, and then I asked them my professors. I feel like I remember working with one of our MTM classmates was a medical student, and one of them was a dentist. So for people from a more clinical leaning background, I think they're gonna love you. Like they love the idea of having people who have some more experience to bring on that side. So maybe like your employer or people that you've worked with in the past who can speak to your clinical experience and your interest in maybe this like research technical side.
Yeah, I did research. My first ever thing in medicine was doing cystic fibrosis research back in high school. And I was part of the data entry team for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. And I was 16 and doing like sweat collection samples, like levels for like these CF patients. And like there was a program at the hospital I was working at where they allowed the CF patients to have their own medication in their hospital room because they're so used to taking their medication all the time that the nurses weren't providing them the right amount of care that they could provide themselves. And so once I saw that program getting put together, I was like, I've always been interested in clinical research and stuff like that. So thanks for answering.
Let's see. Okay, Joy, should we go to Poppy, or should we take Poppy's maybe?
We'll just go through the question or our last few slides and then we'll go back to
Go back. Okay, cool. All right, let me go back to sharing. Okay, so Joy's going to take over here and tell you about some of our career services.
Yeah, so we just want to let you know how the program will help you along this journey, right? Not only do we want to show you the different career possibilities after the program, during the program, what support will you get to help get you there? That's what we're going to go over now. So we want to connect you with our community of alumni. So I think we have over 350 alumni now, approaching 400 after this year. So it's a great community of people. I think because our program, the size of our program, you connect pretty deeply with your current cohort, and then you meet alumni along the way through different events and development workshops. So we have different workshops that we do. We have a professional career lead, is one of our students that helps us put things together. So we have alumni and industry panels and chats. You get to be part of an affinity group with alumni mentors based on your area of interest. You can receive one-on-one coaching. And then we also have grants available to you to attend different conferences. So you have that from MTM specifically. We are also connected into the wider Fung Institute Career Services team, where you can get a little bit more like general info in terms of career prep, in terms of like salary negotiation, workshops, interview prep, those sort of things. But since we are a dual program, you have dual resources, right, at each campus. So here's some of the mountain of professional development resources available on each campus. So we talked a little bit about what's at Berkeley, the Career Center. We have a lot of different startup incubators on our campus. And then over at UCSF, there's the career office. They have their own sort of like incubator, consulting clubs, QB3. So it's just a vast array of resources. But guess what makes our program like the most special? And you connect and find a lot of your jobs afterwards, and then jobs after your jobs, right? Down the line is this group of people. So this is what makes us special. So I'm going to pop back to Verna real quick.
Okay. So again, through our alumni that come from all these diverse backgrounds and that pivot to different roles, you'll be sharing these ideas and pivots that you might want to make. This is really what makes our program really exciting, is the connections that you make here, whether it ends up being helping to develop a new device or a therapeutic, whether it's coordinating clinical trials or going into regulatory affairs, or whether it's being an entrepreneur or even a clinician that is partnering with industry to try and bring new therapies forward. It really is our students that make the big difference in our growing alumni community. So basically, if you have any questions after this, you can email this easy to remember email address, mtm@berkeley.edu. That goes to both Joy and I, and we monitor that every day. And as a reminder, our applications are due on January 6th. At 8:59 p.m. Pacific time. So that's because I guess the whole timing of our system is on the East Coast for whatever reason. So hence the 8:59 time on January 6th. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing again and open it up for more questions. What we do want to like to say is to start your application soon. You don't have to have everything together. So it's good to get into the website for starting your application, because then you'll see what the whole process is, and it'll give you a great visual reminder of like, oh yeah, I need to have 3 letters of recommendation. Oh yeah, I've got to write this, historical statement, but also this more forward-looking statement of purpose, etc. So you can gather your materials as you go along. But I guess we've got just a couple months to go, and so it's a good time to get started now before you get entrenched in the holidays.
Yeah, and if you're interested in learning about other career paths, we had a similar info session last month, and just so you know who was there, we had a product engineer, a senior R&D human factors engineer, and a senior research associate at that one. So I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that one in the chat as well. And then we'll open it back up to questions. So Poppy.
Hi, sorry if we're going over time a little bit. I had 2 questions. So I noticed there wasn't like a requirement for GRE or grad school exams, just making sure that was correct. Okay. And I guess my second question is coming more from like venture focused interest, so more directed to Jack. I was wondering if he could speak more on what specific skills or his background in especially like the MTM program and what he felt was helpful in like obtaining his position and working at McKesson?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the first part is going into so in general, I think for venture capital, it is pretty rare for the funds that I'm aware of to hire people right out of school. So most of the time they'll hire someone who has been in industry for some time. So that could go in two ways. First is typically going through some kind of startup experience. You're either a founder or you work at a startup. So that is one path. Believe it. Another alumni, Justin, he's a general partner at a fund now. So and he used to be a co-founder for this med device company. So that's one path. The other path is pretty much my path, going into some kind of role that's either in the industry working at, let's say, pharma, or working as a outside consultant where you have a very broad base of experience. And I think MTM sets that up very well, going into either industry or startup, or doing consulting. It's just very, very flexible. So a little bit about my experience with MTM. Like I was pretty sure I was going into consulting. So right off the bat, I stretched those credits, however I can, to take on as many courses I can around anything related to consulting or anything that's related to stuff that I felt like I needed to learn more about, for example. So it wasn't just business courses. It was also I took a few like public health courses because I really didn't have a background in understanding how insurance, like how health insurance works in the US, and that's like the totally complicated system. So taking that course was incredibly helpful to fill up that gap. And that prepared me really well going into consulting, and having that basic base of knowledge to work with. And something outside the program itself is pretty much the network. I spent a lot of time while in MTM networking with alumni, and I remember I talked to at least like 6 or 7 folks who were in consulting at the time. And that was really, really helpful for me to decide like where I want to go, what roles to apply, and how to prepare for the consulting roles. So particularly like how to prepare for a case interview, and what kind of activities to do. So for example, that led me to going to case competitions and whatnot, and that was really, really helpful in preparing for that role, also helping to build my resume back then. So I hope that answers your question, because it's kind of like one step after the other.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering all parts of my question.
I think I'll add that, a lot of students don't know. So I'll just jump in and say that if you are considering a consulting role in like one of these larger consulting firms like the McKinsey, Bain, etc., and even some of the smaller ones, but mostly this is a time frame of the larger ones, is that you need to be applying for them before you even come into our program, because their timing is such that they start looking for applications in the summer before you join, the summer, in the early summer before you join us in August. So students that landed those roles were getting letters, for them to accept in the like September, October timeframe. So don't miss that opportunity if you're at all considering that. It's not unusual to be saying, oh, I'm going to be, going into this program, and then, you might get an interview and a job well before you start your role, which would be the following June. And also there's a great core course that's healthcare economics that's taught at UCSF. Really fantastic instructor. I know she's been here the whole time, even with the folks who have been in the program longer, as Joanne Spetz. She's got a great background. And then some of those public health courses. I know Professor James Robinson, well-known professor, and teaches a great class over in I think it's public health and public policy. So really popular classes. Any other questions from folks? We've got questions in the chat. Okay, thank you. Okay, awesome. All right. I think if that is it, then probably we should sign off since we're well past the hour. But thank you so much for coming. And again, reach out mtm@berkeley.edu. Feel free to find us on our website as well, and feel free to pass along any information. We usually post our recordings as well. And abilities to connect further with alumni. Yes, we have the office hours available. Those were in our other session. So if you don't have a link to that, then Joy, do you have a link to the office hours or?
To our current student ambassadors? Sure, let me put it in the chat. 1 second.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so it's mtmberkeley.edu/ambassadors.